A guard rushes down a dark dungeon hallway, yelling for everyone to get ready. Behind the iron bars, a group of terrified children huddle together. The cell door unlocks, and a tiny pink-haired girl nervously clasps her hands. The guard snatches her by the arm, warning her to keep quiet or else. He casually reminds her of the grim fate of the last girl who tried to run, leaving her trembling in fear. Next thing she knows, she's shoved under a blinding spotlight at an underground auction, introduced as the daughter of the fallen Duke Wenskry. Looking out at the greedy crowd, she suddenly realizes she's trapped inside a novel she wrote years ago. In her past life, she was just an exhausted office worker. Her old job was an absolute nightmare of a toxic environment. The sheer stress and constant bullying ground her down completely. She eventually quit to escape the misery. But tragically, she ended up freezing to death alone in the snow. When she first woke up in this new world as a baby, she had no clue what was going on. Slowly but surely, her old memories started flooding back. As she grew up hugging her stuffed bunny, the pieces finally clicked together. She realized her new father was Duke Wenskry, though she was left in the care of Count Tamed. The Duke was a legend in the Empire. But disaster struck the day she was born, leading to her mother's death and her father's imprisonment. With the family absolutely wrecked, the survivors were scattered to the winds. Count Tamed took her in while she was still an infant. She knows her father is supposed to be the main villain of her story. But since she never wrote the fine details of his backstory, she's flying blind right now. She only remembers the broad strokes of her unfinished draft. Trapped in a toddler's body, she can't exactly do much to change things. At first, Count Tamed treated her decently enough. But the second news broke that the Duke had allegedly died, everything flipped like a switch. The Count's family turned on her, using her as their personal punching bag. Even the other kids bullied her without mercy. Following their master's toxic lead, the maids joined in on the cruelty. They treated her worse than dirt on a daily basis. Hiding in the dark kitchen, she wonders how the plot got so messed up since the Duke is supposed to be alive. Knowing things are spiraling out of control, she decides to make a break for it. But her grand escape is an instant fail as she's easily caught in the yard. A tiny child just can't outrun a grown adult. They beat her unconscious for defying them. When she finally opens her eyes, she finds herself tossed into a slave carriage. Now standing on the auction block, the opening bid drops at 100,000. With her hands locked in a wooden pillory, she thinks her life is officially over. The bid quickly skyrockets to 1,000,000, silencing the room. Suddenly, a mysterious hooded man flexes his wallet and drops 5,000,000 on the table. The auctioneer completely loses his mind over the insane amount. She stares in shock, wondering what kind of creep would pay that much for a little kid. With no other takers, the gavel strikes and she's officially sold. The auctioneer happily hands her over to the towering figure in black. She nervously looks down, terrified of what happens next. The man gently asks for her name. Trembling, she admits she doesn't even have one. He kneels down to her level, telling her to stay still so she doesn't get hurt. As he reaches for her wooden restraints, her eyes widen in realization. He uses magic to shatter the wood like glass, his hood falling back to reveal his face, and she knows exactly who this overpowered buyer is. The Duke recalls the strict contract he made with Count Tamed, expecting his fourth child to be protected in exchange for massive wealth. Suddenly, the entire building starts shaking like an earthquake. He continues, stating the Count was supposed to give her a proper name after careful thought. And most importantly, they were supposed to keep her safe until he finally returned. She stares in absolute shock, wondering how Henry Wenskry is even standing here when he was supposed to be locked up. Looking down at her, the Duke coldly states that those were the promises Semen broke. He casually vows that every single person involved in her suffering is going to pay the ultimate price. Without skipping a beat, he orders his knights to absolutely level the building the second they step outside. When asked what to do with the bodies, his answer is ice cold: burn them all to ash. He declares their mission complete and turns to Lave. She stands there frozen, wondering if she's supposed to follow this terrifying guy. It hits her that it's been 7 long years since she was reincarnated into her own unfinished novel. And today, she was just saved from pure hell, officially becoming the daughter of the world's most notorious villain. Soon they arrive at the breathtaking, snow-covered Wenskry family manor. The Duke immediately drops some ground rules for living in his massive castle. He tells her she is his daughter now and needs to act like it, warning her that he has zero patience for bad behavior. He then double-checks her age, confirming she really turned 7 this year. Looking at her tiny, malnourished frame, he points out she's way too small for her age. He flags down the head butler, ordering him to scrub her down and feed her a feast so she doesn't look like a stiff breeze could blow her over. Out of nowhere, he announces he's heading straight to the capital. He promises he won't be gone long, he just needs to clean up the massive mess created while everyone thought he was dead. Before leaving, he gives her one final order: look a little healthier by the time he gets back. Once he's gone, she clutches her chest, finally able to breathe after that intense standoff. She can hardly believe she's actually inside the legendary Wenskry Manor. Suddenly, a group of maids comes looking for her, and she immediately dives behind a pillar to hide. She realizes she bolted entirely out of pure instinct. Back at the Tamed estate, the maids were absolute monsters who hit and pinched her daily. Her old trauma flashes before her eyes, remembering how they used to violently shove her to the floor like a ragdoll. So now, whenever a group of servants approaches, her body goes into pure survival mode. She cowers behind the stone pillar, her whole body trembling as she tries to force herself to move. But these new maids have a totally different strategy, loudly talking about a steamy, crunchy apple pie getting cold. Her stomach instantly betrays her with a loud growl as they list off a god-tier menu of peach tarts and roasted turkey. They even drop the ultimate bait: chocolate chip cookies and lemon macarons for dessert. Speaking softly, the maids assure her that this is her house now, and they'll happily leave if she doesn't want them around. She clutches her dress, realizing these women are nothing like the abusers from her past. Gathering her courage, she slowly steps out, quietly telling them she doesn't have a problem with them. The maids light up with warm smiles, introducing themselves as Faina, Marie, and Chelia. Faina gently extends a hand, asking if she's ready to go absolute goblin mode on that amazing meal. But her trauma flares up again, remembering how her old maids pushed her away for being filthy. She shrinks back, nervously stuttering that she smells too bad right now. Without hesitation, Faina takes her little hands, sweetly reassuring her that it's totally normal to smell a bit after being outside. She asks if the young lady would feel better taking a warm bath first, getting a frantic nod in response. Cut to her soaking in a bathtub that's basically the size of a small pool, melting into the warm water. She happily realizes the people at the Wenskry Manor are actually super nice. Meanwhile, the maids wait outside the door, low-key disappointed that the little lady wanted to bathe all by herself. Faina peeks her head in, softly asking if she's all finished up. But when they step inside, their jaws hit the floor. She has literally scrubbed the entire massive bathroom until it sparkles. Stunned, the maids ask who on earth taught a 7-year-old to clean like a professional janitor. She nervously grips her towel, admitting she just did it subconsciously out of habit. Seeing her panic, the maids quickly change the subject, pulling out a gorgeous fresh dress to get her warmed up and ready for her new life. The maids eagerly offer her different dresses, stopping to quickly dry her hair first. They carefully pull her long pink hair into cute, neat twin braids. Dressed in a gorgeous frilly gown, she looks absolutely stunning. The maids show off a whole collection of ribbons and hairpins to match her outfit. They even lay out a massive spread of jeweled brooches for her to pick from. Once she's all dolled up, they serve her a god-tier dessert table completely packed with cakes and macarons. The head maid sweetly tells her to relax and let them handle all the hard work from now on. Hearing that, she flashes a bright, genuine smile and thanks them. Later that night, she snuggles into her massive, plush bed, wondering if this is all just a dream. She stares blankly, hoping she can stay in this peaceful, warm life forever. The next morning, a maid gently wakes her up, asking if she slept well. Still half asleep, she rubs her eyes and softly thanks her. The head maid excitedly announces a castle tour, while the other maids playfully pout about wanting to show her around too. They walk her through the massive, sunlit corridors of the 3rd floor. She's reminded of the grand dining hall where she ate her feast earlier. Then they head toward a heavy set of doors leading outside. She steps into a breathtaking garden that stays perfectly bloomed all year thanks to temperature control magic. In the distance, a massive glass house sparkles under the bright sunlight. The maid explains the interior is literally decorated entirely with pure glass and gemstones. Next, they wander into the vast art gallery. Her eyes lock onto a massive portrait of the Duke, his late wife, and her 3 older brothers. Staring at the painting, the concept of a real family hits her hard. In her past life, her actual family was an absolute toxic nightmare. The dark memories start flooding back, making her space out entirely. The maid gently snaps her out of it, reassuring her that she never needs to feel nervous around them. She apologizes and points to the painting, asking if those boys are her brothers. The maid reveals they're all busy. The oldest is on a holy quest, the second is at the academy, and the youngest is mastering his crazy new powers at the magic tower. She learns that everyone in the family gets sent away right after their awakening ceremony. This world's lore is wild. Humans receive divine providence from stars to fight off stigma, which are monsters born from a dead god's curse. She suddenly remembers the King of Stigma is supposed to be the ultimate final boss after her father. Curious, she asks the maid what the Duke's specific power is, wanting to see if it matches her novel. Turns out, a silver-eyed woman granted him a cheat code level of mana and absolute knowledge of the world. She casually notes that sounds like an insanely overpowered gift. The maid then reveals that her given power from a nameless star is simply the ability to never fall ill. Honestly, she thinks never getting sick sounds like a massive W. But deep down, she wonders if she'll receive another gift next year. She can't help but guess what her true divine providence will actually turn out to be. Wrapping up the tour, the maid bows and asks if she had a good time. She gives a bright smile, thanking her for showing off all the pretty places. Suddenly, the head butler rushes into the room, totally out of breath. He announces that the master of the house has finally returned. But he warns them that the Duke is in an absolutely foul mood. Back in the day, this guy executed over 100 nobles to drag the imperial family back from complete destruction. Ever since, he's been the most terrifying noble in the empire, even the emperor shakes in his boots around him. She tries to piece together the timeline from her foggy memories of the novel. But since her story was written from the hero's point of view, she has no clue what specific tragedy struck this house. The maid tells her to wait in her room for a moment and rushes off. Unable to contain her curiosity, she decides to take a sneaky peek into the hallway. She overhears the servants whispering, warning each other to keep absolutely quiet so the exhausted Duke can sleep. But they drop a massive bombshell. The Duke literally faked his own death just to bait out the traitors in the capital. Listening through the door, she hears the servants mention an assassin on the loose, suggesting they need to beef up the manor's security. Gripping the stair banister, she realizes they're talking about some serious, heavy plotlines right now. It finally clicks. When the Duke said he needed to settle a mess caused by his fake death, he literally meant hunting down traitors. A chill runs down her spine just thinking about how terrifying he can be. Deciding she definitely shouldn't be snooping, she quietly turns to head back to her room. But as she turns the corner, something feels incredibly off. She hasn't walked far, yet she suddenly finds herself in a dark, unfamiliar hallway she's never seen before. Spotting a heavy wooden door at the end of the hall, she cautiously approaches it. Peeking inside, she finds what looks like a secret alchemy lab, completely packed with bubbling potions and glowing ingredients. Suddenly, transparent, ghostly figures of the manor's servants appear right behind her, warning her not to go inside. Her face instantly turns blue with sheer panic as she realizes they're literally ghosts. Screaming at the top of her lungs, she practically teleports down the hallway in a blind panic. Still running, she suddenly sees a bright, sparkling light ahead. She bursts through a door and somehow ends up right back in the sunlit garden. Catching her breath, she looks up and realizes she's standing right in front of the legendary glass house. But out of nowhere, something bizarre catches her eye. She spots a shimmering ripple near the edge of the pond. Before she even knows what's happening, she plunges straight into the water, surrounded by creepy, shadowy hands dragging her down into the abyss. Thrashing wildly, she feels her lungs burning as the icy water crushes her. The terrifying dark shadows swarm her like a pack of wolves, and she panics, wondering why this is happening. Suddenly, she's back on the grass, coughing up water while a giant void of creepy eyes stares down at her. Just as she's about to lose it, a gentle hand rests on her shoulder, scattering the scary illusion like shattered glass. She looks up, still coughing, to see a boy with dark hair kneeling beside her. He gently chides her, asking if anyone warned her not to enter this specific area alone. Still trembling from the nightmare, tears stream down her face as she admits how terrified she was. Seeing her cry, the boy quickly raises his hands to show he's completely unarmed and not trying to hurt her. With a warm smile, he reassures her that he only wanted to help and begs her to stop crying. He leans in closer, telling her to hold still for just a second. He gently taps her forehead, sending a cool, refreshing wave of magic through her body. Pulling back with a soft smile, he cheerfully announces that all the bad stuff is totally gone. She notices his sleeves are completely soaked, realizing he must have physically pulled her out of the water. Trying to gather her manners, she stammers out a quick, nervous greeting. The boy flashes a surprisingly bright, happy smile just from hearing her say hello. She thanks him for the rescue, though she secretly thinks he's acting a little bit weird. When she asks who he is, he smoothly dodges the question, claiming he's just a guest, and then asks if she's lost. She nods and he gently takes her hand, offering to lead her back to the main house. As they walk through the garden, she realizes his hands are somehow colder than hers, even though she was the one drowning a minute ago. Out of nowhere, he asks how old she is, and she tells him she's 7. He looks at her with a knowing smile, casually mentioning that she must be the daughter the Duke has been searching for. She internalizes that comment, slightly embarrassed that the Duke's frantic search for her is apparently public knowledge. But she admits it makes sense. It would be a massive scandal if people found out a Wenscree was almost sold at an underground auction. Suddenly, they're standing right in front of the grand doors of the main hall. She looks around in absolute disbelief, realizing they literally just spawned here from the glass house in the blink of an eye. Touching her dress, she notices that it's completely dry. Even her twin braids are perfectly styled, like she never fell into the lake in the first place. Before she can ask what kind of crazy magic he just used, the boy quietly tells her she should head inside. He puts a finger to his lips, giving her a charming smile and asking her to keep their little meeting a secret. She turns toward the door to thank him again, asking for his name one last time. But when she looks back, he's completely vanished, leaving behind only a trail of glowing red gem shards. Clutching her dress nervously, she realizes the mysterious boy just ghosted her entirely. Standing alone in the grand hall, she has no idea what to do next. She kicks herself for not asking that weird teleporting boy to drop her off right at her room instead of just the manor entrance. Looking around, she recognizes the hallway and thinks she's finally on the right track. She spots a massive, ornate door and assumes it's hers. Swearing she remembers the design, she confidently pushes it open. But one step inside and she instantly realizes she messed up. Suddenly, a chilling voice echoes from the shadows, saying he knows she's there. It's the Duke, rubbing his temples, completely annoyed that even the weakest assassins are trying to test him today. Recognizing that terrifying voice, her soul practically leaves her body. She realizes she just casually waltzed straight into the Duke's private bedroom. Frozen in absolute terror, she can't even breathe, silently praying for someone to save her. The Duke slowly turns around, fully gripping a massive broadsword. Her legs completely give out and she collapses, suddenly remembering that this guy is a ruthless villain who wouldn't bat an eye at ending his own family. Glaring down with a totally murderous aura, he asks what she's doing in his room. Trembling like a leaf, tears stream down her face as she practically begs for her life. She stammers out a frantic apology, swearing she wandered in by mistake. Seeing her cry, the Duke lets out a heavy sigh, realizing it wasn't an assassin after all. He lowers his sword, casually muttering that it was just a tiny mouse. He then casually mentions he was fully ready to start chopping off limbs, which absolutely terrifies her. But then his tone shifts and he looks down at her with a serious expression. He demands to know what she went through at the Tamed manor that made her immediately drop to her knees and beg for mercy like a cornered animal. She looks up, completely confused by his reaction. She nervously wonders if begging actually made him mad. Instead of yelling, he just tells her to get up and take a seat. Sitting her down, he asks what exactly she learned while living with the Count. Panic sets in as she tries to figure out the right answer to impress him. She remembers from her own novel that the Duke is a massive elitist who values top-tier education. Trying to sound useful, she stammers that she can read and write basic words. She quickly adds that she can do a little bit of math too. The Duke just stares blankly and asks, "Is that it?" She immediately starts sweating bullets, terrified he's going to throw her out since she's basically useless. Desperate to stay in this warm castle, she scrambles to think of anything else to offer. She blurts out that she has a photographic memory and remembers every single guest who visited her abusers. Before he can respond, she drops her ultimate resume. She's really good at running errands. She frantically adds that she can do laundry and scrub floors flawlessly. Between her past life and this one, all she knows how to do is work herself to the bone just to survive. The Duke looks at her with a complex, unreadable expression, completely silent. Changing the subject, he points to a thick book on his desk and asks if she knows it. She blinks, completely thrown off by the random pivot. Blushing with embarrassment, she admits she hasn't read it but recognizes the title. He then asks if she knows how to play the harpsichord. She shakes her head again, promising she can learn to read better if he just gives her a book. But the adrenaline crash finally hits, and she starts teetering in the giant chair before completely passing out. The Duke effortlessly reaches over and snatches her by the collar, catching her midair like a literal kitten. Without a word, he carries her over and plops her right onto his own luxurious bed, telling her to sleep there. Her eyes flutter open for a second, totally confused by what's happening. Half asleep, she realizes she's in the Duke's bed and thinks she definitely needs to get up. But today has been an absolute emotional roller coaster, and her tiny body is completely drained. Yielding to the sheer softness of the mattress, she closes her eyes and immediately drifts back to sleep. Sometime later, she wakes up completely disoriented, looking around and wondering where on earth she is now. She wakes up screaming at the top of her lungs, completely startling the Duke. Frantically apologizing, she admits she got completely lost last night. She nervously realizes she literally passed out right in the middle of his intense interrogation. Without missing a beat, the Duke simply asks for her arm. She blinks, totally confused by the random request. He repeats the order, telling her to hand it over. Still trembling from her nightmare, she cautiously holds out her tiny hand. He explains that the manor is laced with a confusing spatial spell, and without a specific magical mark, people just wander aimlessly. Her mind is absolutely blown as she realizes that's why she kept glitching into random deadly rooms and glass houses. Pointing to the door, he casually notes that her actual bedroom is on the complete opposite side of the third floor. She sweats, assuming this is his polite way of telling her to stay out of his personal space. He dismisses her, mentioning he'll summon her back this afternoon for more questions, and she breathes a massive sigh of relief. Stepping into the hall, she spots her three maids frantically looking for her. They rush over, totally panicked that she had straight up vanished into thin air. The head maid apologizes profusely for forgetting to warn her about the manor's crazy maze spell. She quickly takes the blame, admitting she shouldn't have wandered off alone. But when she shows off her new magical mark, the maids absolutely lose their minds. They explain that the Duke's other kids didn't get this protection mark until they were 10, proving he actually cares about her. A chill runs down her spine, knowing if this is how he treats people he likes, she'd hate to see him go full villain mode on his enemies. Changing the subject, she mentions her upcoming afternoon meeting with him. Hearing this, the maids immediately launch into prep mode. They hustle her off for a warm bath and grab a brand new white dress, so she looks absolutely flawless. Cut to the afternoon meeting, the Duke flips through his paperwork at the head of a massive table. He looks up, asking if she truly remembers every single person who visited Count Tamed. Standing perfectly straight, she prepares to drop all her intel. But the room is completely packed with elite nobles, all loudly whispering about why a 7-year-old is crashing their war council. She shrinks back, feeling their intense glares burning a hole straight through her. Annoyed by the chatter, the Duke shoots them a deadly look, shutting the entire room up instantly. With the room dead silent, he commands everyone to listen to his new witness. He gestures to her, telling her to repeat the list of names from yesterday. She clenches her tiny fists, hyping herself up to deliver the facts. She flawlessly lists off the Marquis and Count who visited, acting like a total boss. She even remembers they were plotting about the southern Felmiancy region, but right at the climax, her stomach lets out a massive, echoing growl. She shrieks internally, absolutely mortified by the timing. She realizes it's her usual snack time, but her body just totally betrayed her in front of the scariest men in the Empire. The Duke gives her a deadpan stare, completely baffled that she's hungry in the middle of a serious interrogation. But instead of getting mad, he immediately snaps his fingers and orders a servant to fetch snacks. Moments later, a gorgeous spread of butter cookies and a massive strawberry tart is laid out on the table. She sits there blushing like crazy, realizing he expects her to eat this whole feast while a dozen nobles watch her. Oblivious to the awkwardness, the Duke demands to know why she isn't digging in. She hesitates, holding her plate nervously. To comfort her, the Duke literally reassures her that the food isn't poisoned. She drops her fork in sheer shock at his totally unhinged villain logic. Poison was the absolute last thing on her mind right now. But looking at his serious face, she ironically feels super safe. She softly thanks him, feeling the room's tension melt away. She flashes him a bright, genuine smile, realizing he's not entirely heartless. She thinks there might be a massive misunderstanding about this supposedly ruthless villain. After stuffing her face, she pats her stomach, deciding the embarrassment was totally worth the delicious tart. Just when she finishes, the Duke casually slides his own plate of strawberries over, demanding she eat those too. The maids stand around in absolute shock at the current situation. The MC explains her confusion. The terrifying Duke has started showing up to every single meal just to taste her food first. Back at her old abusive home, she was used as a human poison detector and suffered horribly for it. Her maid reassures her that the Duke is completely immune to poison thanks to his insanely high mana. She starts to wonder if this scary villain actually cares about her, even though she initially thought he was going to end her. The next day, the Duke casually drops a massive bomb, telling her to get ready for a trip to the orchard. He casually adds that she should take a good look because he's giving the entire land to her. She almost drops her fork, totally stunned by the insane flex. They continue their peaceful meal in the sunlit garden while she tries to process the news. Later, her maids ask what's got her so deep in thought. She admits she's just shocked about the orchard and asks Faina what it's like. Faina drops some massive tea. The Duke built the entire place from scratch just because he heard her randomly mention an orchard during the interrogation. The MC realizes she merely mentioned meeting the corrupt nobles near an orchard. Knowing he picked up on that one tiny detail just to make her happy, she decides she needs to be way more careful with her words. That evening, the maids get her ready for bed, making sure she's perfectly comfortable. But as soon as she's under the covers, her heart beats out of her chest with sheer excitement for tomorrow's picnic. Outside her door, the maids whisper about how she's way too nervous to sleep. They're just relieved she isn't terrified of going outside after her past trauma. Faina gets emotional, remembering how furious the Duke was when he first found out about the MC's scars. Suddenly, the Duke catches them lurking in the dark hallway, startling the life out of them. He tells them to follow him, needing their help for a secret late-night project. The next morning, they take a fancy carriage through a magic gate, teleporting straight to the lush orchard. The Duke and the head butler are already there waiting to greet her. He excuses himself to handle some quick business, telling her to explore the area with the maids. She strolls down the path, taking in the gorgeous, magic-controlled weather and blooming roses. She remembers the Duke mentioning that he also gifted massive plots of land to his sons to rule over later. She's absolutely mind-blown, realizing she actually owns something for the first time in 2 lifetimes. The head butler walks up, offering her a ride on a beautiful pony. But she immediately gets distracted when a massive, fluffy golden dog runs up to her. She throws her arms around the dog, giggling in pure joy. Later on, taking a break, she inspects a very suspicious, lumpy chocolate cookie. Faina leans in and whispers that the Duke actually baked it himself. Flashback to last night, the Duke pulled the maids aside to ask for a fast, simple baking recipe. He stubbornly declared that his new daughter will only eat food provided directly by him. The MC thinks his protective logic is absolutely wild, but she takes a bite anyway while he watches nervously from a distance. Even though it tastes like a literal disaster, she politely lies and says it's good, making him instantly relax. Not wanting him to feel left out, she sweet-talks him into taking a bite of her own yummy snack. The Duke watches her, thinking about how his other sons either fear him, avoid him, or cry when they see him. He realizes this little girl is completely different from the rest of his fractured family. On the train ride back, he asks if she enjoyed the orchard, and she happily agrees. She chatters about the delicious fruit, innocently comparing its beauty to the glass house. The Duke instantly freezes at the mention of the glass house. She tenses up, nervously explaining she only went inside because she got lost before receiving her magic tracking mark. He tells her it's fine, but strictly warns her never to go in there alone because of the highly dangerous things hidden inside. She blinks in total confusion. She clearly remembers walking in there completely unharmed last time without triggering any traps. Then it hits her if that place is incredibly dangerous and restricted, who on earth was that mysterious, teleporting boy she met? Meanwhile, in a dark meeting room, a man violently slams his fist on a table, screaming that the situation is ridiculous. A noble tells Count Evelyn to calm down before he does something stupid. But Evelyn is absolutely losing his mind, screaming that the Duke is actively wiping out half their traitorous forces across the empire like they're nothing. Inside the secret meeting room, Count Evelyn endlessly rants about a clear pattern in the recent attacks. He directs his rage entirely at Count Tamed, pointing out that every single targeted location is directly connected to him. He accuses Tamed of leaking secrets, but the leader of the meeting tells everyone to shut up and stop fighting. Even so, Tamed is warned he better be ready to prove his innocence before the Marquis takes action. Back in his office, Count Tamed slams his fist on his desk, absolutely fuming over Duke Wensky's survival. He realizes the Duke must have been suspicious of him from the very beginning. He thinks back to how the slave auction got completely destroyed, realizing it was all a trap and that he needs to act fast before he gets wrecked. Meanwhile, the tiny pink-haired girl sits in a massive chair, struggling to draw a picture. With nothing else to do around the giant castle, she has recently taken up drawing as a hobby. She gets a sudden burst of inspiration and decides to head to the art gallery to study the paintings. Since she finally has the Duke's magical mark, she can easily wander the halls alone without getting lost. She stands in front of the giant family portrait to see how the artist captured the details. She remembers that the Duke's 3 sons are supposed to return to the castle soon. In her original draft, she wrote them all to be pure evil, but since the Duke turned out to be a softie, she hopes they will be nice too. She starts walking down the hall, wondering if their relationship with the Duke was always so strained. Just as she decides she needs to write down everything she remembers, a spooky glowing text bubble appears right in front of her. She completely freezes, staring at the ghostly words in terror. When the ghost servants ask where she's headed, she screams and takes off in a wild sprint. Bolting down the hallway, she realizes she completely forgot about the manor's resident ghosts. Even though they are bound by a contract to protect her, she thinks they are still way too scary. The ghosts float behind her, begging her to slow down so she doesn't trip and hurt herself. She runs so fast and far that the hallway suddenly becomes dead silent. Catching her breath, she wonders if she misheard the ghosts warning her about something dangerous. Looking around, she realizes she has accidentally stumbled into a quiet, sunny garden. She gazes up at a massive, beautiful apple tree towering over her. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out, teasingly asking if she's lost again. She looks up and there he is, the mysterious dark-haired boy casually sitting in the tree with a shiny red apple. Her eyes widen as she realizes she has run into him yet again. Flashback to earlier, a knight hands a confidential report directly to the Duke. He confirms that Count Tamed secretly attended the suspicious meeting at Marquis Alfara's manor. Shifting the topic, the Duke suddenly realizes his new daughter still doesn't have an official name. She explains that the Count always told her names are too important to just give away lightly. The Duke's face darkens, and he immediately demands to know where she is at this very moment. Back in the garden, the mysterious boy beams down at her from his sunny perch. Pouting, she crosses her arms and insists she's absolutely not lost this time. The boy just smiles warmly, clearly not buying her excuse. She blushes red, hoping he didn't hear her stomach growling like a beast earlier. Trying to ignore her embarrassment, she points up and asks if she can have one of those apples. The boy cheekily replies that the apples are his, but she argues the tree is in the Duke's garden. He grins and retorts that it could also be his, claiming he and the Duke are super close. She stares up at him, completely confused by his logic. Fuming, she realizes she's being completely clowned on by a kid. The boy chuckles and asks her to spread her skirt out and take 3 steps forward. She complies, and a perfectly ripe apple plops right into her dress folds. She gazes at the shiny red fruit, completely mesmerized by how pretty it is. With a graceful leap, the boy lands smoothly on the grass right in front of her. He reaches out and holds up another apple. Smiling, he says this one is the ripest of the bunch, and she softly thanks him. He then casually asks for her name, but she hesitates and admits she doesn't actually have one yet. Turning the question back on him, she looks up and asks for his name. The mysterious boy reveals his name is Kyan, claiming his real name is way too tough to pronounce. He reaches out and hands the little girl a bright red apple. He flashes a warm smile, saying it would make him really happy if she just called him Kyan. But in her head, the girl is totally confused. She literally wrote this novel and there was definitely no Kyan in it. She figures he must be a super minor extra, but then she remembers his sudden appearance at the lake. She turns around to ask him how he got there. But the dude pulls a literal Houdini and vanishes into thin air. She jumps back, completely startled by his disappearing act. Suddenly, the Duke appears out of nowhere, asking what she's doing alone out here. She stares up at him nervously, relieved that he doesn't actually look mad. Trying to play it cool, she offers him the apple, saying it's incredibly delicious. But before he can take a bite, a servant comes sprinting up to them, gasping for breath. He announces that Count Tamed has just arrived at the estate. The girl internally panics, remembering she already exposed the Count's terrible actions to the Duke. She honestly thought she would never have to see his face again. The mustached Count comes practically running through the gates, putting on a massive show. She hopes he wouldn't dare treat her the same way with the Duke standing right there. But he instantly wraps her in a huge, fake hug, and she completely freezes up like a deer in headlights. She realizes her hopes were dead wrong. The sheer terror completely locks her body down, she literally can't move. The Duke glares at the Count, demanding to know what he thinks he's doing. The Count immediately steps back and bows, giving a totally fake apology about just missing her so much. Not buying it for a second, the Duke orders everyone to the drawing room. Inside, the tension is thick enough to cut with a knife. The Duke doesn't beat around the bush. He directly confronts the Count, asking why his daughter looked like she went through absolute hell while living with him. The Count starts sweating and waving his hands, claiming she actually had a wonderful time. The Duke lists off the hard evidence. She can't read, has signs of hard labor, and looks completely neglected. The Count desperately scrambles for excuses, blaming her sickness, her supposed love for commoner clothes, and throwing his own servants under the bus. Sitting on the couch, the girl gets chills. She knows every single word out of his mouth is pure cap. She desperately wants to scream the truth to the Duke. Feeling confident in his manipulation, the Count tells the Duke to just ask her himself. He turns to her with a sweet smile, but his eyes are screaming a threat. Her mind instantly flashes back to his past abuse and the brutal slaps she endured. Terrified, she quietly nods and agrees with his lies. She's just way too paralyzed by fear to actually fight back. Sitting stiffly on the couch, she whispers that he's right. The Count flashes a smug, punchable grin, thrilled that his manipulation is working perfectly. He keeps digging the hole, casually mentioning that she's happier now with her real dad. He even has the audacity to claim she makes things up for attention out of jealousy. The Duke looks at her sadly and tells the maids to take the exhausted child to her room. A maid gently guides the shaking girl away from the toxic meeting. Up in her massive, luxurious bedroom, she completely shuts down. She huddles under the blankets, frustrated with herself for not speaking up earlier. She realizes the deep trauma in her young body is way stronger than her adult mind could ever handle. Back at the meeting, the Count bows out, promising to finish the chat later. But the second the door closes, his face twists into pure malice. He curses himself for not taking her out when she was smaller. His eyes glow with villainous rage as he realizes his excuses are running out fast. But right at that moment, up in the bedroom, strange, glowing lights begin to float around the trembling girl. Mysterious, magical voices echo through the room, begging her to listen to what they have to say. While the girl is fast asleep, mysterious, glowing words begin to echo through the dark room. She jolts awake, completely spooked as glowing text boxes float in the air around her bed. The invisible voices apologize for waking her up, but insist there's something incredibly important she needs to hear. Two ghost maids materialize, explaining they couldn't reach the Duke and only have a small window of time to warn her. One of the spirits points toward the hallway, urging her to look. They show her a vision of the sketchy Count having a secret meeting with a chef about cooking with a specific ingredient. The girl is shocked, realizing she totally recognizes the man the Count is talking to. In the vision, the Count promises to get the chef a high-paying job at the palace once the deed is done. Suddenly, the memory fades as the girl hears footsteps and yells out into the dark hallway. The ghost maids panic and immediately hover protectively around her. But it's just the Count, wandering the halls and finding nobody there. The ghosts let out a massive sigh of relief, feeling like they just survived a literal roller coaster. Back in her room, the girl decides to just wait until the Count leaves to tell the Duke, knowing the guy is absolutely up to no good. But then her mind snags on the ingredient the Count mentioned, icoral. She pieces it together from the novel she wrote. It's a poison that blocks mana, and the Duke is only immune to regular poison because of his mana. She realizes the Count has basically found the ultimate cheat code to assassinate the Duke. And even worse, the guy from the vision is the manor's own head chef. Without hesitating, she swings her door open and bolts down the hallway. She knows that if the chef has already been bribed, waiting until the Count leaves will be way too late. She hypes herself up, remembering that the Duke is a literal villain who wouldn't hesitate to delete his enemies anyway. She sprints through the massive palace halls, determined to stop the plot before breakfast. Finding the Duke, she looks up at him and says she has some seriously important news. Looking at his confused face, she reflects on how much kinder he actually is compared to the character she originally wrote. Plus, he's her dad now and she actually wants to protect him. She genuinely wishes for his safety. So she completely spills the tea, exposing the Count's lies and explaining the ghost maid's warning. She tells him exactly how the Count bribed the chef to slip ichorl into his food. She nervously looks up at the Duke, warning him to be super careful. The Duke's expression darkens instantly, and he calmly asks a servant if breakfast is ready. The servant confirms it is, adding that the Count is trying to skip the meal by hiding in his room. The Duke immediately orders the Count to be dragged to the dining hall. The Duke turns to the girl and gently tells her to come with him. She follows him, a bit surprised by his incredibly calm reaction to a literal assassination plot. They walk toward the grand dining hall together in silence. She starts overthinking, wondering if he even believes her wild story about ghost maids and poison. In the dining room, the Count is already kissing up to the Duke, acting like having breakfast together is the greatest honor. The girl sits there sweating bullets, totally unsure of what's about to go down. Out of nowhere, the Duke casually mentions that the Count was right about his daughter lying for attention. The Count is visibly startled but quickly tries to play along, agreeing with a forced, nervous smile. The girl thinks she's been betrayed and prepares to literally flip the table to stop the Duke from eating. But then the Duke drops the hammer, stating that in order to prove his daughter is lying. He hits the Count with the ultimate Uno reverse card, ordering him to taste test every single dish that is supposedly poisoned. The Count's soul practically leaves his body as he stammers out a pathetic excuse about not being able to eat vegetables. The girl is absolutely stunned, realizing the Duke believed her all along. She trembles, squeezing her hands together as she watches the Count squirm in the hot seat. Finding her courage, she glares at the Count and loudly calls him out for ordering the chef to poison the food. She confidently declares that she is definitely not a liar. The Count completely loses his cool, gritting his teeth and calling her a little brat. The Duke glares down at the panicking Count, finding it highly amusing that this clown tried to make his daughter look like a fool. Without a second thought, the Duke orders the guards to lock the Count and the chef in the dungeon so he can question them personally. The Count screams about it being a massive misunderstanding as the armored knights literally drag him away like a sack of trash. The Duke calmly explains that the Count has been locked up for attempted assassination and will eventually be hit with a treason charge. The little girl's eyes go wide, realizing this is exactly what the ghost maids were warning her about. The Duke looks at her gently and asks if there's a specific punishment she wants to inflict on the guy. Since he's the one overseeing the sentence, he's totally down to make whatever she wants happen. But she just stares back and humbly asks him to punish the Count strictly according to the law. The Duke agrees to her mature request, promising they'll sit down later to talk about everything she went through at the estate. Later on, the maids are absolutely fuming, calling the Count pure evil for what he did to her. They swarm around her on the couch, double-checking to make sure she's actually okay. One maid clasps her hands together, totally hyping the girl up for saving the Duke's life. She blushes and modestly brushes it off, saying she just passed along what the ghost servants told her. The maids just beam with pride, treating her like an absolute hero. One of them even pulls out a literal hammer, fiercely promising to protect her from now on. Through narration, she reveals that the ghost servants can only speak to humans at dawn and dusk. And she can only hear them because her mana senses are incredibly high, just like her parents. That night, her mind is racing from the absolute roller coaster of a day. She flops onto her massive bed, totally unable to fall asleep. She stares at the wall, relieved that she'll probably never have to run into that toxic Count again. Knowing he's locked in the underground dungeon, she admits she's low-key curious to see him rot, but also too scared to actually go look. Suddenly, a familiar voice asks if she wants him to show her, scaring her half to death. It's Kyan. He casually stands by the door, and she's mind-blown that he just teleported into her bedroom like it's nothing. Before she can even process it, the room suddenly goes pitch black. She glances around, wondering if the lights just went out. But nope, the mad lad literally teleported them straight into the creepy underground dungeon. She stares at Kyan, seriously questioning who this overpowered kid actually is. Without explaining a thing, he grabs her hand and pulls her down the hall. As they creep forward, she hears muffled voices echoing from the shadows. Kyan gently leads her down the stone steps, warning her to be careful in the dark. Suddenly, an angry voice echoes out, screaming that this whole situation is outrageous. She instantly recognizes that whiny tone. It's definitely Count Tamed. Peeking around the corner, they spot the Duke standing outside the iron bars of the Count's cell. She panics and tries to hide, terrified that they're way too close and about to get caught. But Kyan flashes a confident smile, casually revealing that they are completely invisible and inaudible as long as they hold hands. Her jaw practically drops. Using high-tier stealth magic right in front of the Duke is an absolute flex. Feeling safe, they lean in closer to eavesdrop on the intense interrogation. Inside the cell, the Count is throwing a tantrum, but the Duke coldly reminds him that no noble will try to save a traitor. The Duke stares him down, stating he doesn't really care about the treason against the Emperor. But his eyes glow with pure rage as he demands to know why the Count abused his daughter. Listening from the shadows, the little girl's heart skips a beat. She realizes the Duke actually never abandoned her or forgot about her. The Duke admits he was a fool to trust the Count, explaining he only stayed away because the Count always lied and said she was sick. But the Count aggressively fires back, yelling that the Duke is the real sinner for what happened 7 years ago. Right as the tea gets scorching hot, Kyan suddenly teleports her back to her bedroom. She wipes her eyes, confused as to why she's suddenly crying. Kyan gently lets go of her hand, his job as the ultimate tour guide complete. And just like that, he dissolves into pink sparkles and vanishes into thin air again. She flops back onto her pillow, her brain absolutely frying over who Kyan really is. She realizes she desperately needs to ask the Duke about what really went down 7 years ago. But first, she needs to calm down from the insane emotional whiplash. Clutching her giant pillow, she waddles over to the Duke's door and shyly asks if she can sleep in his room tonight. The Duke looks down with his usual stoic face and warns her he doesn't sing lullabies. She just smiles cutely and says she'll sing to herself. The next morning, the maids are hovering around the young lady like Secret Service agents. They frantically ask if she's cold or wants a blanket, leaving her smiling nervously at their extreme overprotectiveness. 2 more maids rush in offering warm tea, making sure she's absolutely comfortable. Another maid chimes in, announcing that it's time for her bath. Suddenly, a whole squad of maids volunteers to wash her, but the girl's sweat drops and politely says one is plenty. Relaxing in the warm water, she notices her old scars are practically gone. The maid praises the magical healing herb they got straight from the palace pharmacist, proving it works like an absolute charm. The maid angrily mutters about the horrible things the Count did to their precious lady, but quickly shakes it off to focus on massaging her. She playfully squeezes the girl's shoulders, making her giggle and squirm from the tickles. Later, the girl reflects on a massive rumor she overheard. Count Tamed was sentenced to death, and his entire family name was erased from history. Realizing the threat is permanently deleted, she feels a huge weight lift off her chest. She's finally safe. Meanwhile, the Duke orders his purple-haired assistant to send off a letter immediately. He then asks for the materials he requested, and the assistant drops a comically large stack of books onto the desk. Back with the girl, a maid bows and informs her that the Duke has requested her presence. She blinks in surprise, completely caught off guard. As she walks through the massive halls, she nervously wonders if he has more questions about the Count's abuse. The maid announces her arrival, and the Duke calls her into his grand study. The little girl stands there wide-eyed, wondering why there are so many random books piled up everywhere. The Duke casually tells her to take a seat and just play by herself for a bit. She bounces onto a super soft couch, totally confused as to why he brought her here just to watch him work. But then she overhears the Duke shaking his head, rejecting a name the assistant suggests. The assistant lists off legendary names like a 500-year-old empress or an ancient sage, but the Duke completely vetoes them. The Duke coldly demands better options, forcing the stressed assistant to keep digging through the massive books. Peeking over from the couch, she suddenly realizes the Duke is trying to pick out her official new name. Desperate, the assistant suggests the name Mary. The Duke immediately asks for its deep historical meaning. The assistant nervously admits it has literally zero meaning, but it's super cute. The girl can't hold back a tiny giggle. She realizes her new dad is an absolute disaster at picking names. But seeing him try this incredibly hard just for her gives her a super warm, fuzzy feeling in her chest. The Duke realizes she's going to be a handful, but his cold exterior completely melts. He flashes a rare, gentle smile as he bids her good night. She ultimately receives the beautiful name Rach. Her full name, Rachetista Charlotte, is inspired by the legendary summer roses of House Wenscree. Sometime later, a butler approaches the Duke's door with a letter. Narration reveals that ever since the Count's arrest, the mansion's staff has been treating her like literal glass. It turns out the Imperial doctor strictly ordered everyone to shower her with constant love and attention to heal her trauma. The maids take this mission very seriously, nodding eagerly to make sure she never experiences an ounce of stress again. The overprotectiveness completely intensifies. They constantly ask if she needs anything, and when she wants to go to the garden, a maid even offers to carry her so she doesn't have to walk. Outside, the maids happily play hide-and-seek with her in the sun. One maid counts to 100 and excitedly yells out that she's coming to find her. They chase her around the beautiful estate, having the absolute best time. But there's a huge problem. Nobody realizes the girl is running a dangerously high fever. Cut to the drawing room, the Duke is absolutely furious, unleashing his terrifying aura on the trembling maids. Roch weakly apologizes, saying it was her idea to play outside. The Duke sighs, realizing the chilly outdoor weather is to blame, and decides to let the maids off the hook. But instead of just telling her to stay inside, the Duke literally pulls out a massive glowing magic circle to change the temperature of the entire land. His assistant goes into full panic mode, screaming that altering the region's climate is a massive task that will absolutely wreck the local ecosystem. The Duke doesn't care at all. He declares he'll just throw infinite budget at the problem until the whole duchy is warm enough for his daughter to roam freely. He totally brushes off the concerns, casually claiming they're just speeding up an existing plan. The assistant sweats bullets, realizing he desperately needs to talk his boss out of this overpowered flex. Taking advantage of the chaos, a maid quickly whispers to Roch, urging her to try out a secret trick they practice to calm the Duke down. Roch quickly steps in to stop the Duke from unleashing his insane weather magic. She tugs on his sleeve, suggesting they just warm up the manor instead since she only plays in the garden anyway. The Duke pauses, realizes she makes a solid point, and scales down his spell to just heat the estate. He completely agrees to her compromise, but strictly tells her she has to inform him if she ever plans to go beyond the castle walls. She promises she will, completely understanding his overprotective dad energy. The Duke's voice softens as he officially calls her his daughter, Roch. He even flashes a rare, genuine smile, leaving Roch and the maids absolutely starstruck. Thanks to the quick treatment, her mild fever clears up in a day, but the worried maids keep her on strict indoor lockdown. Stuck at her desk, she starts getting incredibly bored of just drawing all day. Needing a change of pace, she heads out to grab some books from the study. Walking down the hall, she peeks over the balcony, amazed that all the snow has already melted. But she gets a little too distracted and suddenly loses her footing. Just as she wobbles, a familiar voice asks if she's all right. It's Kyan. He smoothly catches her, apologizing for popping up out of nowhere and nearly giving her a heart attack. Staring at him, she suddenly remembers the glowing butterfly she saw earlier in the garden. She connects the dots and straight up asks if he was the butterfly. Her mind flashes back to a conversation she had with the Duke, where she casually asked if a boy named Kyan lived in the manor. She described his black hair and red eyes. The Duke immediately went into full-on Terminator mode, his aura literally catching fire as he demanded to know if this secret boy did something to her. She realizes that Kyan is practically a ghost, completely bypassing the Duke's overpowered detection magic. Snapping back to the present, she looks Kyan dead in the eye and asks if he's even human. Kyan just hits her with a closed-eye smile and casually admits he's actually a fairy. Roch glares at him, absolutely convinced he's trolling her. She knows from her own novel that fairies live in the local forest. But fairies in this world are straight-up bizarre, looking like headless knights or two-legged cats, not pretty boys. Kyan just chuckles, assuring her he's the rare, completely harmless type. She decides to just roll with it, figuring he's saved her skin enough times to be trusted. She asks why he showed her the butterfly, and he admits it was just because she looked super bored. He smoothly asks if she wants to hang out and play. She hesitates, remembering her promise to stay indoors for the day. Kyan easily agrees, promising they'll keep their adventure strictly inside the estate. Meanwhile, the Duke pauses his work, his sharp senses tingling as he feels a weird shift in the manor's energy. He narrows his eyes, clearly suspicious of whatever invisible nonsense is happening. Back with the kids, Roch marvels at the massive, snow-free estate through the window. Kyan leads her to a massive set of doors. They step inside a breathtaking, sunlit glasshouse filled with vibrant flowers. Kyan offers to give her a proper tour since her last visit ended with her taking a chaotic plunge into the lake. But he adds a little spice, promising to show her a secret area the maids definitely aren't allowed to see. Roch gets slightly nervous, remembering her dad warning her about dangerous stigma monsters sealed nearby. Kyan gently grabs her hand, telling her there's absolutely nothing to worry about. He flashes a confident smile, stating the monsters are actually terrified of him. They stroll through the massive, sparkling indoor garden, and Roch is completely mesmerized by the magical scenery. Kyan mentions that it only gets prettier the deeper they go. But suddenly, creepy, multi-eyed purple blobs scurry out of the bushes, running away like startled roaches. Roch stares at the weird blobs, and Kyan casually explains that they are stigma subspecies. He drops some heavy lore, while true stigmas are born naturally or from dark magic breaths. The ones that fail to form completely turn into these weird subspecies. Roch is totally confused as to why these dark creatures are just chilling inside a pretty glass house. Kyan looks ahead with a serious expression and drops a massive plot twist, asking if she knew this beautiful duchy used to be a completely barren wasteland. Kyan reveals that this lush estate used to be a freezing, deserted wasteland. He drops some heavy lore, explaining that the late Duke received divine protection from a star. The Emperor tried to play nice and build a relationship, but he got way too greedy. A massive war broke out, and when the royals won, they banished the Wenskree family to the monster-infested north. The Emperor thought they'd come crawling back for help, but the Wenskrees absolutely flexed on them, turning the barren land into a literal fortress. They even started training the monster subspecies just to keep the royals sweating in fear. Roch listens in awe, realizing this totally flips the script on her original story where her dad was just a one-dimensional villain. She thinks it's ironically hilarious that the people being hunted are literally weaponizing the hunters. Kyan gives a dark look, surprised that humans aren't more terrified of the monsters. He brings up the Altva Empire, a massive nation that was completely wiped off the map by the Stigma King just 9 years ago. The tragedy was so huge it instantly went down in the history books. Roch realizes Kyan definitely views the world from a completely non-human perspective. The heavy conversation ends, and they quietly continue their stroll through the glasshouse. Kyan wraps up the VIP tour and Roch politely thanks him. But then Kyan tilts his head, mentioning that someone is looking for her. Before she can even process his fairy hearing, a shadowy hand slithers out of the bushes and completely snatches her ankle. Kyan's eyes go dead cold. He mutters worthless creatures and instantly vaporizes the shadow monster into dust. He turns back to his normal, smiling self, gently checking if she's okay. Roch catches her breath and suddenly realizes something crazy. She never actually told Kyan her real name. He admits he just heard the servants say it, but asks if she's too shell-shocked to walk. She brushes it off, and Kyan formally asks her to introduce herself properly. Blushing slightly, she realizes she hasn't actually introduced herself with her new name yet. She proudly announces she is Roch Charlotte Wenskree, and Kyan smiles, saying it suits her perfectly. With the formalities out of the way, she bluntly asks if this makes them friends now. She decides she doesn't care if he's a fairy or a ghost. She's just happy to have a buddy and promises to act more casual. Kyan gives a soft smile, promising to always be the Kyan she knows. Suddenly, a maid's voice echoes in the distance. Kyan tells Roch they'll hang out again soon. By the time the maid rounds the corner, the fairy boy has pulled another Houdini and vanished completely. The maid checks on her, totally oblivious to the shadow monster attack. But she drops massive news: Roch's older brothers are finally back. Roch nervously peeks into the Duke's office, spotting 2 tall boys standing with her dad. She starts sweating bullets, knowing that villain families usually have completely toxic relationships. She instantly regrets writing them as absolute menaces in her novel. Her dad looks down at her with his usual intense, intimidating stare. He kneels down to her level, completely towering over her tiny frame. But then he drops his scary aura and softly points out how small she is with her big eyes. Roch sassily replies that she's definitely not a doll since she can talk, completely catching him off guard. The oldest brother, Abel, steps up with a warm smile, gently telling her how much he missed her. But before she can react, the second brother, Camelin, swoops in and scoops her right off the floor. He literally spins her around like an airplane, hyping up how his little sister is way cuter than anyone else's. Rach's head is spinning, but she's actually having a blast on the free ride. Abel quickly scolds Camelin for acting like a wild animal in front of their dad. The Duke formally introduces Abel and Camelin, mentioning the third brother will arrive later. Rach nervously says hi. The Duke immediately lays down the law, ordering the boys to stay locked in the manor unless the palace calls them. The brothers instantly nod, fully respecting their dad's absolute authority. Rach watches them, realizing her villainous brothers are actually total softies. Camelin suddenly turns to their dad with a desperate request. He begs to take Rach on a short walk, wanting to spend some quality time with his new sister. In the blink of an eye, the Duke basically teleports right next to Rach, silently standing guard like a final boss. Undeterred, Camelin excitedly calls for Rach, and she eagerly dashes after her goofy new brother. Rach happily waves goodbye to her dad as she heads out for a walk with her brothers. The Duke flashes a soft, genuinely warm smile, telling her to have a good time. Abel literally blue screens. He stares at his dad in pure shock, completely baffled by this rare display of affection. Outside, Camelin is completely mind-blown by the lush green grass, noting there was a ton of snow the last time he visited. He mentions he heard their dad almost used a massive, overpowered spell to warm up the entire duchy before his assistant begged him to stop. Camelin whispers that even though the Duke is a genius, he acts totally unhinged sometimes. Rach just laughs nervously, silently admitting to herself that she almost let that insane plan happen. As they walk, Rach quietly observes her two older brothers. Camelin is a total extrovert, but Abel is super quiet. She remembers her own novel's lore. Abel is supposed to be a cold-blooded monster who completely despises his father. She worries that his silence means he's already deep into his villain arc. But when she calls his name, Abel looks down at her with a gentle, completely normal smile. Suddenly, Camelin gets hyped up and suggests they give Rach a cute nickname, just like all his friends at the academy do for their sisters. Abel fully supports the idea. Rach leans against him, super relieved that her brothers actually get along and seem to genuinely care for her. The brothers excitedly brainstorm, tossing around names like Rosie, Racha, and Tati, trying to find the perfect fit. They finally settle on Shay as the absolute winner. Abel notices her hesitation and asks if she hates it, but she smiles, deciding she'll gladly accept the slightly childish nickname. Not wanting to leave them out, she declares she's giving them nicknames too. She dubs Abel Abe and hits Camelin with the totally unintimidating nickname Millie. She claps her hands together, super proud of her adorable naming skills. The brothers blush and chuckle. Neither of them has ever had a nickname before, and they secretly love it. But Abel suddenly gets serious, gently warning her that she can only use those names in private, never in public. He drops a heavy truth bomb. Their family is viewed as the ultimate villains of the Empire, and everyone is just waiting for an excuse to attack them. Showing any weakness or acting too casual would be like handing their enemies a loaded weapon. Rach stares up at him, finally understanding why the atmosphere inside the manor is always so insanely tense. She realizes the Duke didn't raise them to be harsh out of cruelty, but to make them completely untouchable. It's a lonely reality. They have all the power in the world, but absolutely no one to trust. Seeing her quiet down, Abel immediately apologizes, worrying he triggered her traumatic memories of the Count. Rach blinks, surprised that he actually knows all about the Count Semin drama. She realizes the evil, merciless Abel from her novel is nowhere to be found. Instead of a cold-blooded psycho, she just sees a super sweet, caring big brother. She flashes a bright smile, reassuring him that since the Count was punished, she isn't scared anymore. But then Abel's eyes darken. He casually mentions that the Count's execution was way too fast, noting a rumor that the guy went completely crazy from a monster attack beforehand. Without skipping a beat, Abel starts listing off horrific torture methods, like skinning the Count alive or ripping off his limbs with a deadpan face. Rach is absolutely horrified. Camelin quickly steps in and tells Abel to chill out, reminding him that graphic torture talk isn't exactly kid-friendly. Abel snaps out of it and checks on Rach. She sweat drops, realizing he definitely still has some of that classic villain DNA in him. To change the subject, Abel asks if she wants to tour the glass house, but she says she's already been. Curious, she takes a shot in the dark and asks if either of them knows a boy named Kyan. The brothers look at each other, totally confused. Neither has ever heard of the guy. She describes him, mentioning his height, black hair, and weirdly reddish eyes. She even adds that Kyan is just a nickname because his real name is supposedly too hard to pronounce. Camelin snaps his fingers, instantly assuming Kyan is just her imaginary friend. Roch realizes they completely missed the mark and decides to just drop it. She sulks a bit, figuring they wouldn't know anyway since they've been stuck at the academy. Seeing her pout, the brothers panic, thinking they upset her, and eagerly ask what this Kyan kid is like. She blushes and describes him as handsome and sweet, but admits he can be a little naughty sometimes. Abel's overprotective brother instincts instantly activate. He sternly tells her that a naughty friend is bad news. His eyes go totally dead as he casually threatens to sink this boy to the absolute bottom of the lake. Camelin chimes in, but instead of stopping him, he says ruining the lake water would make Dad mad. They should just decapitate the kid and bury him in the garden instead. Roch is left utterly speechless, completely unable to process her family's insanely unhinged logic. Later at dinner, the Duke stares them all down, sternly telling everyone to just focus on eating their food. The boys instantly snap to attention, respectfully saying yes, father, as they sit back down. Roch quietly eats her shrimp, noting that the atmosphere is exactly as strict and silent as she wrote it. She realizes she's spent so much time just focusing on the Duke that she totally neglected to think about the rest of the family. It's becoming super clear to her that some parts of this world are completely different from the novel she created. But after an insanely long day, she's completely tapped out. She flops onto her bed and decides to just sleep on it. Later that night, her eyes suddenly snap open. She's super thirsty. She grabs her cup of water but stops, realizing all the lights in her room should be completely off. She peeks toward the door, wondering why there's a bright, glowing light spilling in from the hallway. She nervously opens the door, asking if someone is out there. She is instantly greeted by a stunning, glowing ghost wearing a full wedding dress and veil. The ghost politely says it's a beautiful night. The ghost gently apologizes if she scared her, completely catching Roch off guard. The ghost asks Roch to follow her, promising that they have everything perfectly prepared for her. Roch is totally hesitant to just follow a random spirit in the middle of the night, but she remembers the ghost servant saved her before, so she decides to trust her. As they walk down the hall, Roch notices it's insanely bright outside for it being the dead of night. She looks out a massive stained glass window and sees a brilliant full moon. She realizes the moon is amplifying the manor's magic. The ghost explains that on full moon nights, spirits like her gain enough power to take physical form without needing the Duke's permission. Roch asks if that means normal people can see them too. The ghost ignores the question and warmly states that all the spirits have been eagerly waiting for this day just to finally meet her in person. She leads Roch into a massive banquet hall filled with a beautiful piano, a huge feast, and sparkling chandeliers. Dozens of ghost maids in uniform bow deeply, apologizing for not properly introducing themselves sooner. The ghost in the veil introduces herself as Annabella, the head of the ghost servants. The rest of the ghost staff chime in, introducing themselves as the heads of security, curse blocking, and magic management. Roch smiles, realizing she totally recognizes all their voices from when they saved her. The ghosts excitedly confirm it, pointing out who stopped her from falling down the stairs and who guided her to the Duke's office. Annabella explains they threw this midnight banquet just to formally welcome her to the family, hoping she enjoys the event. Roch is absolutely amazed, noting that even the instruments being played and the food being served are totally transparent ghost items. She happily claps her hands to the music, having the time of her life. Sitting at the grand table, Annabella politely asks if she can ask Roch a question. Annabella leans in, asking if the dangerous being is still approaching her. Roch is completely confused, not understanding what she means by dangerous. Her mind flashes back to the frantic warnings the ghosts gave her in the forest when she almost fell into the lake. Suddenly getting chills, Roch asks if Annabella is talking about Kyan. Annabella's aura immediately shifts into dark, crackling energy. She grabs Roch's hands, her voice trembling as she warns her that she absolutely cannot go near that creature. Annabella states she can't explain everything but stresses that Roch must stay completely away from him. Roch stares at her, genuinely asking what Kyan actually is. Annabella's dark aura explodes as she grimly reveals that all the ghosts lost their lives to that exact creature, binding them to the manor by a magical contract. She explains that the creature put strict limitations on how much the ghosts are even allowed to talk about him. Roch's heart drops, She remembers Kyan playing with her and wonders if that's what a killer fairy actually does. Annabella holds a finger to her lips, offering one crucial piece of advice. She tells Rot she absolutely must remember the creature's true eyes. Annabella promises that since Rot has the magic ability to hear their voices, she will eventually be able to see the monster's real eyes. She sadly adds that this is the absolute limit of what she's allowed to reveal. Suddenly, the grand doors fly open, and the Duke stands there, radiating pure, terrifying fury, demanding to know why they are messing with his daughter in the middle of the night. The ghosts instantly drop to their knees in absolute terror, frantically apologizing to their master. Roch quickly waves her hands, begging the Duke not to be mad since they were just throwing her a sweet welcome party. The Duke scoops her up into his arms, strictly stating that waking a child up at this hour is totally unacceptable. The ghosts are shocked he actually said something sweet. The maids realize he's literally just following the imperial doctor's strict child education manual to shower her with constant love and support. The Duke turns to carry her back to her room, but Roch peeks over his shoulder. She looks back at the ghost servants bowing silently in the hall, leaving her completely stunned by the dark warning she just received. The Duke tucks Roch into bed, promising to have strawberry cake served for breakfast. His expression turns serious as he asks if the ghost servants told her anything weird. She mentions they listened to music, ate food, and talked about a fairy named Kyan. The Duke instantly shuts it down, flatly stating there are absolutely no fairies in this manor. Roch pauses, remembering that Kyan can bypass the Duke's detection entirely. She recalls asking her dad about a black-haired, red-eyed boy earlier, and he had no clue who she was talking about. He gently pats her cheek, suggesting she must have just had a wild dream. But then he mentions there is another boy living in the estate, though she's never met him since he barely leaves his room. Roch's eyes widen, completely shocked to learn there's a hidden resident in the house. The Duke tells her he has to get back to work but will see her in the morning. As he turns to leave, Roch instinctively grabs his sleeve. Realizing what she did, she awkwardly hides under her blanket and quickly wishes him a good night. She internally dies of embarrassment, realizing her adult mind is losing to her childish body's clingy instincts. The Duke smiles warmly, telling her to sleep well and promising to introduce her to her third brother, Calyx, tomorrow. Roch buries herself in her pillow, cringing at her own behavior before letting it go. She starts wondering about the relationship between the Duke and his sons. She remembers writing Calyx into her novel as a complete psychopath known as the Mad Dog. She worries if he'll be a menace, but hopes the plot changes will make him nicer. She closes her eyes, praying for a peaceful morning. The next morning, she happily tells Abel and Camelin all about the Ghost Orchestra's late-night concert. Camelin gets super hyped, especially when she mentions they are having strawberry cake for dessert. He begs her for a bite, and she happily pinky promises to share. Suddenly, the Duke walks in, and the room instantly goes dead silent. The family finishes their meal in complete, awkward silence. Finally, the strawberry cake is served, and Roch's eyes light up. But she realizes there's something weirdly familiar about the cake's design. The brothers stare at it like it's an alien artifact, completely baffled by its shape. Roch nervously asks her dad if he made the cake himself, and the Duke calmly admits he did. The entire room literally gasps. The brothers look like they've seen a ghost, completely floored that their terrifying father is a part-time baker. He explains he started baking just to keep Roch safe from any poison risks. Roch happily takes a bite, hoping this baking hobby will help mend their fractured family. Suddenly, there's a loud knock at the door. Roch perks up, realizing the guest has already arrived. The door swings open, and Calyx, her third brother, walks into the dining room. He takes one look at Roch and coldly asks, "Who is this peanut?" Roch's soul practically leaves her body at the absolute disrespect. Camelin immediately snaps at him, telling him not to call their sister a peanut just because she's small. Calyx ignores him, asking his dad if that thing is the fourth child he mentioned. He bluntly asks if they even checked her DNA, warning that a rival family could have sent a fake child to spy on them. The Duke's expression goes pitch black. He coldly calls Calyx's name, his aura radiating pure menace. He tells Calyx he's gotten way too arrogant and orders him to stay locked in his room. Calyx immediately backs down. Camelin quickly comforts a shocked Roch, promising to deal with Calyx later. Roch begs him not to, realizing Calyx's suspicion is actually logical, and getting him in trouble will only make him hate her. The brothers grumble, casually wishing they could resurrect and torture the Count all over again. Roch hugs Camelin's arm, finding comfort in her brother's slightly unhinged protective instincts. But she can't shake off Calix's harsh words about her identity. She slumps onto the table, feeling surprisingly hurt because she's gotten so used to everyone's constant love. She realizes her actual emotions are regressing along with her physical age. Plus, she admits the whole situation is incredibly bizarre. In the novel she wrote, the character Roch never existed, and House Wenskree only ever had 3 sons. While the side characters and villains made brief appearances in her book, her own existence remains a massive mystery. Shay sits on her bed, realizing her current situation is completely different from the novel she originally wrote. She recalls that her original plot was supposed to take place much later, back when Count Tamed was still around. She wonders if her mere presence is changing the timeline, though she is glad things are mostly going in her favor. She imagines herself as the ultimate creator, wondering if being the author makes her special in this world. Lying down, she ponders the biggest mystery currently surrounding her life. That mystery is Kyan, a character so insanely overpowered that his absence from her original story makes absolutely no sense. She face splints into her pillow, exhausted because her child body literally overheats whenever she thinks too hard. To keep her sanity, she decides to just treat Kyan like a figment of her imagination. Suddenly, she hears someone approaching her room, even though she told the maids she wanted to be left alone. The door swings open and Abe walks in holding a book with a bright smile. He sits on her bed and reads a silly fairy tale about a princess saving a wimpy prince, making her giggle. He asks her politely if he can read her a story, catching her off guard. She recalls how surprised she was when he visited, wanting to spend quality time before heading back to the royal palace. Abe puts on an absolute masterclass of acting, reenacting the story with hilarious intensity. Shay clutches her pillow, amused that even in this magical world, kids still hear stories about monsters under the bed. Abe gently pats her head, offering to personally deal with any monsters lurking in her room. But his toned-down plan involves decapitating the monster and planting flowers over its grave, completely terrifying her. She lies back down, wondering if there is actually any difference between monsters and magical stigmas. She asks him why monsters always hide under beds, and Abe explains it is because they were never baptized. He describes how every living thing is baptized at birth by the natural elements of the world. This baptism allows all life to breathe and exist harmoniously under both light and darkness. Shay finds this explanation incredibly poetic and asks what happens to creatures that miss out on this blessing. Abe assures her with a confident smile that unbaptized creatures simply do not exist in this world. She immediately starts overthinking, realizing an unbaptized entity would have to be something that surpasses nature itself. Or worse, something already dead, right before Abe jump scares her with a playful roar. Heart-pounding, she glares at him, deeply offended by the sudden scare. Abe immediately panics and apologizes, realizing he took the joke a bit too far. She gives him a dramatic side-eye but agrees to let him off the hook just this once. He gently pats her head again, his expression softening. He whispers how genuinely happy he is to have her back and how much he missed her. He asks if he can keep reading to her from time to time, and she gladly nods. Later that night, Shay snuggles into her sheets, feeling like she is finally embracing being a child. Surrounded by the genuine affection of her family and servants, she feels like she is finally healing from her past 2 tragic childhoods. Suddenly, a loud thud echoes through the quiet room, making her freeze in fear. She tries to shake it off, assuming her mind is just playing tricks on her after Abe's spooky story. But then her entire bed violently jolts, causing her to sit up with her heart racing. She tries to rationalize the noise, knowing Abe would have detected an actual intruder earlier. Too terrified to sleep, she decides she needs to investigate what is going on. Gathering her courage, she hangs upside down off the mattress to peek into the dark abyss under her bed. Suddenly, a squad of worried knights bursts into the room, and her father instantly scoops her up into his arms. They search the area but find absolutely nothing, leaving her father confused about what shook her. Crying tears of pure terror, she insists there was a terrifying monster with glowing red eyes hiding down there. Abe looks incredibly guilty, admitting he might have triggered a nightmare by reading her a scary story earlier. Her father glares at Abe with icy rage, demanding to know why he would do something so reckless. Seeing the trouble she caused, Shay quickly speaks up to defend her brother. She hugs her father tight, claiming she feels safe now because her dad, Abe, Millie, and tiny Calix are all here to protect her. Calix is immediately triggered by the tiny comment, sparking a hilarious sibling argument. Meanwhile, Abe stands to the side, looking deeply remorseful for scaring his little sister. He gently strokes her hair and promises to never read her anything spooky ever again. But the protective father is ready to banish him from the room, forcing Shay to frantically de-escalate the situation before her family drama gets any worse. Raj plants a sweet thank you kiss on her father's cheek while he cradles her. She immediately uses her cuteness as leverage, warning her father that if he scolds Abe, she will never kiss him again, which instantly sends her father into a state of absolute, soul-crushing despair. Completely defeated by his daughter's threat, Henry immediately folds and tells Abe to just choose better stories next time. Rach promises her other brother Millie that he will get a cheek kiss next time, leaving him looking thoroughly dejected. Hoping to score some sibling bonding time, Millie asks if she wants to sleep in his room tonight. Not wanting to be left out, Abe chimes in and offers his room too. However, Henry tightens his grip on Roch, silently asserting his dominance over his sons. Roch smiles brightly and announces that she wants to sleep with her dad tonight. She explains that her father is the strongest, making him the least scary option, which absolutely obliterates her brother's egos. Henry looks incredibly smug and satisfied while the brothers completely sulk in the background. Later that night, tucked safely in her father's massive bed, Roch drifts off to sleep feeling entirely secure. The next morning, Roch sits in a grand chair, completely lost in thought over the bizarre events from the night before. She tells her worried maid that she is going out for a quick walk to clear her head. As she walks through the beautiful greenhouse, she suspects that a certain mysterious boy is behind all this chaos. Standing in the middle of the garden, she begins calling out for Kyan. She threatens to go to the lake all by herself if he does not show his face immediately. Suddenly, a playful voice complains that her threat is not very fair. Kyan magically materializes right next to her, gently holding her hand and asking if she is okay. He flashes a warm smile, noting that this is the first time she has ever actively searched for him. She gets straight to the point and demands to know if he was the monster under her bed. Kyan looks at her dramatically, asking why it took her so long to finally figure it out. He bows elegantly, admitting he is glad she finally put the pieces together. Roch is completely stunned and asks why on earth he would pull a stunt like that. Kyan pouts slightly, explaining he was deeply offended when she called him an imaginary friend. Roch's mind is completely blown as she wonders how he could have heard her talking to herself in an empty room. He reminds her that calling a real, breathing person a figment of her imagination is pretty rude. He leans in incredibly close, gently cupping her face to prove that he is indeed very real. Softening his tone, he sincerely apologizes for scaring her to the point of tears. Roch accepts the apology, but insists on finally getting some real answers about what he actually is. She firmly states that she cannot be friends with someone whose true identity is a complete mystery. Suddenly, Calix bursts into the glass house, aggressively demanding to know who allowed Kyan inside. Roch is totally blindsided, wondering how Calix even knows Kyan when everyone else in the manor is clueless. Calix glares at Kyan, warning him to remember his place and what he is allowed to do. He points accusingly at Kyan, calling him a punk before insulting Roch with her old nickname. Ignoring the hostility, Kyan turns to Roch with a sparkling smile and asks if they can still be friends. Roch demands to know how this is possible since Kyan previously claimed to be a literal fairy. Calix loses his temper completely, yelling at Kyan to shut his mouth and leave immediately. Smoothly brushing off Calix's tantrums, Kyan offers to politely escort Roch back to the manor. Roch clutches his arm, her mind reeling as she tries to connect the dots of all these strange mysteries. She recalls her own novel's lore about the heinous Duke Wenskry holding the crown prince hostage to control the imperial family. Kyan looks at her knowingly, asking if she enjoys stories like that, while she wonders if everything he has done is just magic. He cryptically notes that her father is an exceptionally talented and dangerous man. Roch counters, pointing out that her father claimed to have absolutely no idea who Kyan was. Kyan leans down and whispers that it is because the name Kyan only exists in her own memory. He smiles softly, telling her that she is free to think of him as whatever she likes. He confesses that his only goal is to make sure she is no longer afraid of him. Roch's brain is absolutely scrambled as she tries to process his bizarre explanation. She wonders if Kyan is even human, or if his incredible magic is responsible for all the anomalies. Ultimately, she is left with one massive question. Is Kyan actually the crown prince, and how is he pulling off such a crazy double life? Rach's brain is working in overdrive as she tries to decipher the ghost servant's cryptic warnings from the other night. The puzzle pieces finally click into place. Her supposed imaginary friend is actually the crown prince. She flashes back to the chaotic moment she bumped into her father and Abe just outside the building. Her overprotective dad wastes absolutely no time, snatching her right out of the crown prince's arms like a prized possession. Rach suddenly remembers Kyan explaining that House Wenskry literally controls the imperial family from the shadows. She realizes the crown prince has every logical reason to despise her family, but her thoughts are abruptly cut short. The Duke steps up, offering Kyan a greeting that is polite but incredibly ice-cold. He smoothly kicks the prince out, announcing it is time for him to return to the palace and that Abe will personally escort him tomorrow. Kyan just smirks, acting like he is genuinely bummed to be leaving so soon. He locks eyes with Rach, casually dropping that they just became friends to stir the pot. The Duke immediately goes into lockdown mode, ordering Abe to pack his bags for the palace. He then turns to Camelin and completely ruins his week by announcing a new tutor starts tomorrow. Finally, he tells Rach it is snack time, leaving her wondering how she is supposed to navigate this mess alone. Slapping on a bright smile, she cheerfully suggests they all have snacks together as a family. Deep down, she knows leaving her brothers alone with the manipulative crown prince is a recipe for disaster. Cut to the snack table where Rach quietly munches on her food, feeling a severe case of déjà vu. The dining table is fully packed, but the awkward silence is so thick you could cut it with a knife. She spots Kalex sulking in his chair, still completely salty that she yelled at him earlier. Meanwhile, her dad and Abe are holding down their usual stoic, stone-faced combo. And then there is Kyan, sipping his tea with a smug smile like he is watching front-row drama. Unable to handle the tension, Rach takes charge and tells the maid to hand over the entire cake so she can share it. She bravely walks up to her intimidating dad and serves him the very first slice. She hands portions to Abe and Millie, earning some sweet praise from Abe for her neat cutting skills. She serves the crown prince next, but makes the fatal mistake of calling Kalex her tiny brother, which instantly triggers him. Kalex blows up, but in classic tsundere fashion, he immediately offers to feed her the cake himself if she won't take it. The Duke swiftly shuts down the sibling squabble with a single command, ordering her back to her seat. His cold demeanor melts instantly as he asks if her chair is too high, though she stubbornly insists she can handle it herself. He gently wipes a smudge off her cheek, showing a rare soft spot for his daughter. Trying to keep the conversation flowing, Rach asks Abe if the Imperial Guards get good snacks, offering to check his meal plan. She breathes a sigh of relief as the ice finally breaks, praying this wholesome family peace actually lasts. Later in the garden, Kyan asks if she finally believes he is a real person, but she admits he still feels too magical to be human. Looking at his strange eyes, she ponders the wonders of the world, wondering if his insane power comes from the divine star of protection. A chilling memory flashes in her mind of a veiled woman warning her to always remember its eyes. Caught deep in her thoughts, she accidentally murmurs her theory about divine providence out loud, leaving Kyan completely confused.